Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to do a little deep dive into a friend or foe for some of us. Some consider it a friend, some consider it a foe. But we're going to talk about a really cool study, a simple study, and just that came out with it just blew us away effects in terms of markers, blood lipids, anthropometrics, weight, waist circumference, hip circumference, and that little friend or foe is called apple cider vinegar. So it's going to be a fun conversation today. Some really cool results from a really simple application. So as we do at the Fasting for Life podcast, we want to give you actionable things that you can put into your day-to-day lifestyle and fasting lifestyle starting now. And this is going to be one of the most actionable episodes we've ever done because it is one of the most simple applications we've ever talked about. But there are some cool nuances here, and we'll get into that in just a minute. So welcome in if you are new to the Fasting for Life podcast. Thank you so much for giving us a shot. If you want to hear more about Tommy, more about me, what fasting has done for us, head back to episode 1, give it a listen. It is our launch episode where we share our story of how fasting transformed our lives and really started this movement and our desire to help as many folks lose the weight once and for all, get control over their blood sugar, feel more confident, prevent disease, reverse diabetes, balance hormones, et cetera, et cetera. All things that we've done and now that we coach on with our programs and our protocols and our free resources. So head to the show notes, check that out as well. If you are a long-term listener and a so-called Fasting for Life OG, you know who you are. Thank you for once again for showing up, sharing, downloading, being a part of our fasting journey. And we just really are grateful for each and every one of you that continues to listen in week over week. So Tommy,
sir,
let's talk about this wonderful little thing called apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, apple cider vinegar is an interesting thing that I've always had in the pantry for certain recipes, or, like it used to just gather dust in there. It was just kind of a staple item, just kind of hanging out, right?
Yep.
And, but as the research started to mount, and I remember hearing some things like, oh, it can be helpful for blood sugar. I remember hearing that like years ago. Of course, at the time I had weight related issues, but I didn't perceive the blood sugar related issues that had kind of preceded those weight related issues.
Yep.
And so, that's part of the thing where I heard that it could be helpful, but I didn't know that I needed it at the time, and wished that I knew that it could have been helpful for me at the time. That would have been nice to understand, but I had some cognitive dissonance at that point. And, seeing what the data look like and how apple cider vinegar or other types of vinegar are used throughout the world, oftentimes to serve along with bread before a meal. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. I did work at some Italian restaurants back when I was younger. And, just kind of seeing that, I didn't really have a taste for vinegar. I would rather, dip it in something else. So it just never really appealed to me. And it just wasn't part of my diet or my utilization, or definitely not my supplementation. So it was just one of those things that was kind of on the back burner that I knew might be helpful for some folks. So it's interesting to really be seeing the evidence mount as to the helpfulness and the simplicity of the use of apple cider vinegar, which we're going to get into. And I think just kind of having an open mind about it is kind of a first place to start.
Yeah. So let's just talk about it. I don't like it in terms of the taste.
Okay.
but I love what it can be used for as an optimizer for my fasting lifestyle.
Mm.
So we're going to start with the article and kind of go through just a few things that we found, share the incredible results with it, with you from it. So this article came out in the Frontiers Clinical Diabetes Healthcare, the journal 2023, November, the improvement effect of apple cider vinegar as a functional food on anthropometric indices, blood glucose, and lipid profiles in diabetic patients, a randomized controlled clinical trial. So a couple things to note. The inclusion-exclusion criteria. It was a great study, about 8 weeks long, which was really cool. 80 adults, type 2, and we had 37 in the ACV group and 36 in the control group. It's a random, parallel randomized controlled open label clinical trial. And it was actually conducted in Iran. And we've talked about one other time on this podcast, the Iranian food pyramid, or the Iranian version of the of our guidelines here for the food pyramid that we are supposed to follow, which we don't agree with. But it's interesting because about 15% of the population in Iran suffers from diabetes. And here in the United States, it's about 12% of the population. And as you age, those numbers go up. So 30% of the population in 65 years or older. So that's about 38 million people. That's not taking into account the pre-diabetics, which is the CDC estimates that it's about 1 in 3 people, which is about 98 million Americans, on top of the 38 million Americans that already have diabetes. So we're talking about a massive problem. And it's something, to your point that you mentioned earlier, that lurks beneath the surface in terms of when it becomes a problem. So we know this is something that increases as you go through the decades of life. We see that increase, but it's no longer called adult onset for a reason, because we're seeing diabetes in much younger populations. And, with the obesogenic food environment, the sugar-laden foods, the refined processed foods, all of those different things are going to contribute to that, as well as we are definitely more sedentary and more screen focused than we've ever had been. So there's lots of things that contribute to this increase. But the reality is that the best way to never have to worry about it is to prevent it. And if you do have it, what are the simple things that you can do to create long-term sustainability? If we're talking about complete lifestyle overhaul, cold turkey type approach, I'm never going to look at a carbohydrate again or have a piece of cake again, or you're already in the system, you have diabetes, and you're managing it, I want you to know that you have the option to reverse it. Wow. And that's not something that's talked about very often. So we're going to talk about a very small piece
or prevent it.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about this issue, you're like, well, why the heck are we talking about something like apple cider vinegar? Well, there's some functionality here that's going to allow us to put this into our fasting lifestyle and use it as a starting tool, a stopping tool, or just an optimization tool. So I really just the study, and we'll get into the details here in just a second, Tommy, but the study itself blew me away in the fact of the anthropometric indices. So weight, BMI, waist circumference, hip circumference, blood pressure, fasting blood glucose, insulin, A1C, and the lipid profile. So total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides, right? The ACV group absolutely smoked the control group, like hand over fist, like just incredibly well. And I was like, okay, how much ACV must have they been ingesting? Like gallons? Like were they in a caloric restriction? Like what dietary recommendation? Like what did they do to get such drastic results from such a small thing? It just blew my mind.
Yeah. You know how much ACV they were taking in? It was literally 2 tablespoons.
One time a day.
Right. 2 tablespoons. Midday, before or after lunch, didn't seem to matter. They weren't told when it had to be taken, somewhere midday, before or after lunch. And I mean, 2 tablespoons is like, you could just shoot that back. you could probably, so if I do a couple of tablespoons like that, I might mix that in with maybe 3 ounces of water, something like that, and just sip on it for maybe like 5 minutes if I don't feel like shooting it back. The only reason why I wouldn't just shoot it back might be if I was like in a longer fast, and it kind of, I don't love the way that it sits on my stomach.
That makes your belly feel.
Yeah. So I'd rather just kind of sip on it for a few minutes like that. But I mean, within a matter of a few minutes, it's done, and then it feels fine with a little bit of water mixed in. Like it feels fine. So it's so simple. It's so simplistic that it's like really. But to see a 22-point decrease or a 23-point decrease in fasting blood glucose from the ACV group, just once per day, 2 tablespoons. I mean, you're talking about just a couple of ounces here. And it's like, I mean, that's an incredible effectiveness of something that I can't think of something that you could do in less time to have that kind of effect with no change in diet, no change in meal timing or macronutrient profile or number of calories or caloric restriction or anything else like that. And just to put a foundational point on this, you mentioned this being based in Iran, based on the food-based dietary guidelines for Iran, and looking through those, I mean, they're very similar to the ones, for the United States. The foundational layer is carbohydrates, it's breads and pasta, and then for their dietary guidelines, it's eat fruit 3 times every single day, and minimize the use of liquid cooking oils and sugar as well. But they always kind of group sugars and oils in the same group up at the top. They're not the same. Your body doesn't treat them the same. It's absolutely misleading to group them the same like that. But the point is, and also reducing the consumption of salt, which we talk about salt a lot, and proper hydration, right? And reducing high salt foods as well, which is an interesting broad bucket too, because highly processed carbohydrate based high salt foods would not be beneficial. But at the same time, if you're having a good source of protein and it's highly salted, that can be very, very beneficial. So I hate the way that they kind of use those broad strokes with it. But just to draw some of the parallels. Yeah, go ahead.
So I love the fact that this is a starting place for the majority of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this group, we're talking about type 2 diabetics that are non-insulinogenic and that are not above a BMI of 35.
Right.
So if we look at what I was hearing there is what you were saying is the gen pop, as we like to call it, right?
Sure, yeah.
So 74 to 76%, depending on which link you click on the CDC website, of the U.S. population is overweight or obese. So we're talking about BMI from 25 to 30 and 30 to 35.
Mm-hmm.
That's where most of us fall. And we're not saying that you have a high BMI. Yep. We know the correlative effect that carrying that extra weight week after week, year after year, decade after decade, you are increasing your prevalence, and the percentage prevalence of diabetes is supposed to double by 2030. So in 5 more years.
I believe it.
So we're talking about crazy numbers, crazy effect on healthcare costs. And then the options you're given, like the Iranian food pyramid that you were going through, is not for a reverse of course. It's for a slow roll management to requiring more intervention, more medication, and more management.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, wait a minute. Why does this apply to anyone listening to this podcast? I was one of those 80 million Americans that was an undiagnosed pre-diabetic at one point because my blood sugar was normal. And I didn't realize the visceral fat, the central weight, waist to height ratio, all of these different things. So that's why I love this study, because it talks about those anthropometric indications as well. So what I love about this is that the intervention removed the outliers, right? The high categories, low categories. It was really specific, and it really, in terms of dietary recommendations or changes, the groups were equated for caloric intake before and after the 8-week study, and they weren't given any like major life-altering, cold turkey kind of clearing out the pantry recommendation. It was literally just take 2 tablespoons of this one time a day.
No other changes.
Could it be more simple? Not start eating less and moving more and working out.
Right.
Just literally in the group that already had the condition that we're all trying to avoid because we know where it leads us and we know the complications and the quality of life later in day. That's it.
That's it. Crazy.
So simple.
So simple. And the cool thing is, though, that it can be added to anything else that's working for you as well. Any other good choice, any other meal timing effort or fasting effort or optimizing your food choices a little bit more effort. But even if those changes aren't in place, this still has a beneficial physiological effect. And you know what's interesting to me is that when you look at how this potentially works and go, how is it possible that apple cider vinegar could have this sort of effect? And so the authors talked about that. And you know that's a really interesting thing, because when you're looking at what the body has to do whenever you ingest food, you're bringing in nutrients, you start breaking them down chemically, and then you have to choose a path for those nutrients to go. Well, which bucket are they going to fall into? Are they going to get burned through now? Are they going to get burned through later? Do they need to be stored short term? Do they need to be building blocks for the immune system or the musculoskeletal system, nervous system, et cetera? And so actually slowing down your gastric emptying, so the rate of food releasing from the stomach, leading to that lower blood sugar, or a longer effect that it would take to actually have a spike in blood sugar. So it's smoothing out some of the curves after that, which then blunts the insulin response potentially after that. So you don't have to have as big of swings, as big of highs and lows, and actually allowing the insulin to work better at the site of the skeletal muscles and at the site of the liver too, and then actually increase the glucose uptake at the muscles and at the liver. So that's a really, really good thing.
What I just heard was metabolic efficiency.
Yes.
And flexibility.
Yes, absolutely. And that can be, you can add to that effect right there by something else beneficial, like a post-meal walk. That would further push the benefit of what the apple cider vinegar would be doing for, let's say, for lunch, but especially at dinner, because like a dinner OMAD, let's say, where you waited until dinner time to have that one meal a day and to bring in your nutrients. And then you're less physiologically optimal later on in the day. So, that's a great time to think about it as well. I could use as much help as I could get right now. So like, especially during a later dinner or a larger meal, well, some apple cider vinegar and that post-meal walk, I mean, you're really like pulling out all the stops for it.
One thing I found interesting too is, and I'll just rat-a-tat-tat off the results here in just a second, so we don't bury the lead. But they made their own apple cider vinegar at home.
Interesting.
I don't know. Like culturally, probably. I don't know the Iranian culture at all. But unless you're a homesteader, which is a very small percent of the population here in the United States, we're just going to go buy the damn thing, right? Like, I'm just going to go buy it. Okay.
Yeah. I have Bragg's in my pantry right now.
Yeah, we have an organic one that has all of the gunk in it, the mother or whatever it's called.
Right.
We get it at Costco. We buy a 3-pack. It's so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But they made it at home, which is cool.
That is cool.
And it's literally 1 ounce. So think back to your college days where you're taking shots, or at least for me. 1 ounce shot.
Were you doing shots of apple cider vinegar back then?
No, I should have been. A 1 ounce pour is 30 mLs, or if you go to the top of the shot glass, which is what you always wanted from the bartender back in college,
right?
The 1.5 ounce pour, that's 44 mLs. Like, we're not talking about a lot here. And like you said, Tommy, you can dilute it into about 100 mLs, and that's what they did in the study of water. So it's like a 3-to-1 ratio, pretty much.
Yeah.
So a little 4-ounce glass. I prefer just to shoot it, and we'll talk about the differences that we see and how we like to use this. Of course, we're opposites, which is what I love here. But in terms of the actual metrics that were tracked in the results, I just kind of want to list them out. So for instance, for weight loss, the ACV group versus the control group, it was minus 2.4 kilograms compared to minus 0.2.
Oh, wow.
So incredible change.
Yeah, 10, 12 times the results there. Basically 0 versus right around 5 pounds.
Yeah. So 5
no
pounds over
changes,
8 weeks by doing literally nothing except adding in 1 shot of apple cider vinegar in the middle of your day.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great trajectory. Right.
BMI change, another 0.9 kilograms versus 0.1 kilogram change. So BMI came down slightly.
Of course, yeah.
From 30 mLs. Like, it's still crazy to me. Waist circumference, near 2.9 centimeters, almost 3 centimeters versus 0.05 centimeters.
Wow. Okay, so over an inch versus 0. And that's a great spot to be losing it too, because if you said 5 pounds lost, but it wasn't necessarily like centripetally, centrally located, then it's not as beneficial. But if it's centrally located, I mean, now you're getting into the
that's where we want to go.
Area. That's exactly where we'd like it to come from.
Yeah, and then check this out: the hip, 3.6 centimeters versus 0.3.
Wow.
So hip and waist.
Yeah, man, 1.5 inches there.
Covered men and women right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then the total energy intake for kilocalories, the groups are almost identical. There was a 40 calorie reduction in each group. So we know that was not the driving mechanism there, which was really cool.
It wasn't a calorie deficit.
Right.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Systolic blood pressure changed by almost 6 points.
Really? Just a little less pressure in the system.
6 points.
Yeah.
Hey, doc. That's from having that's right on the line. If you're at the 130 or the 125, doing this for 8 weeks, man, you're now normal.
That's nice. Yeah.
Really cool. Okay. Here's the big one. You mentioned it earlier. Fasting blood glucose changed by 23 milligrams per deciliter.
Yeah, that one is big. That's a big change right there.
You're waking up at 120 pre-diabetic. Now you're waking up in the 90s. No longer pre-diabetic.
Yep. Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
A1C, 1.4% change in the ACV group versus 0.05.
Yeah, that's shocking because so not just 1.4 like relative percentage points, but actually a 1.4 change on the A1C number, right? So HbA1c, when we're looking at that and the 90-day moving average of your blood glucose levels, having that sort of change over 8 weeks, I mean, that just like what you said about fasting blood glucose, that can be enough to take you from the pre-diabetic to the normal range, or from diabetic to the pre-diabetic range.
Yep.
Which is massive.
And that's that 90-day average. So it would have been cool to see if they did it 90 days, right? Because that's what the A1C test, but it was an 8-week study, which was still good.
Sure.
So interestingly enough, insulin went up 2 points, 2 IUs, and the home IR went up 0.7. So we'll come back to that and talk about why and the mechanisms here in just a second. But in the short term, it's a positive. We'll add some context to that. For triglycerides, we saw a decrease in both groups, not statistically significant.
Okay.
However, LDL went down 25 points.
Wow.
Versus up in the control group.
Wow.
What?
That's awesome.
From 30 mLs once a day.
I would have never expected this.
Right? HDL went up 1.7 and HDL went down, which is the opposite direction that we want in the control group.
Well, yeah. So probably that, that slight increase in LDL and that slight decrease in HDL in the control group is basically like, hey, these are diabetic patients continuing to do business as usual.
Continuing to follow diabetic recommendations with diabetic medical management.
Right. You would expect just small ticking up over time of all of these negative or of the negative markers.
Right.
Yeah. If you weren't changing anything, that's exactly what you would expect for a diabetic patient. But again, like you led off this conversation, we can go in the other direction. Even if most people aren't pulling that off, it's very, very possible if we pull the right levers.
We're not even talking about adding fasting into the mix.
Right.
Yeah. Or any of the other optimizers, the post-meal walk, breaking up, your movement into smaller increments throughout the day, which have been more effective, moving your meals earlier in the day. We're not talking about any protein pacing, any of that stuff, right? Yeah. You knew where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously total cholesterol came down if LDL came down. And then the ratios for LDL, HDL, and cholesterol to HDL ratio all improved as well. So just incredible to see. That's why this article stood out to us. And you talked a minute. I want to talk about that insulin for a second. But you talked about the, if we were going to look at the metrics that were tracked in here, and when we recommend labs and doing our coaching and our coaching clients, we'll review labs from time to time, and we have recommendations on what labs we like to see versus the standard medical labs, right? Like fasting insulin, for instance, and HSCRP and all of those. But if we were to look at just like the baseline, hey, what should you know and what you should be focusing on is anthropometric indices, right? So weight, BMI, we don't really care much about the BMI, but we did an episode on BRI, the body roundness index, which takes into account the waist to height ratio and the waist circumference and the hip circumference. So we love those metrics. The blood pressure, obviously, we know that. Fasting blood glucose, obviously, insulin, A1C, and the lipid profile. I mean, that's like your starter pack for making long-term lifestyle healthy changes, right?
Absolutely.
So all the improvements were there. The mechanisms were cool because you mentioned the slowing the gastric emptying, right? And how you don't like to do it on an empty stomach because the way it kind of gives you that burny feeling sometimes.
It's a little burny.
We talked about the increased glucose uptake by the liver and muscle. It also inhibits enzymes involved in fat synthesis, so the production of fat. And the effect on the liver. It increases the excretion of bile and fecal acid, so it's going to get your digestive tract to work more effectively. And it also works on some disaccharides and amylase activity, which helps reduce that post-meal blood sugar. So just incredible results. Now, the one thing that did stand out was that slight increase in insulin. And I want to make sure we touch on this because we are talking about a group of individuals in this study, type 2 diabetics, that already have a dysfunction in terms of their metabolic flexibility or the metabolic function.
Absolutely.
So what we see here is an increase in a short-term increase in insulin sensitivity. So ACV by itself in a separate study, one of the research articles that was mentioned or referenced in this article, has been shown time and time again to improve insulin sensitivity in the peripheral tissues. So what it's doing is it's taking the food that's coming in and it's using it more efficiently and shuttling it into the skeletal muscle so it can be used rather than it floating around in the bloodstream and ultimately being stored as fat. So it's actually a more efficient insulin response. So it's really kind of like, think of it like enhancing the glucose disposal. It's like a little trash truck running around.
Yeah.
And that's really where we feel that compensatory short-term increase in insulin production improved that glucose uptake. And that's why we see that in this population, right? Because it is a type 2 diabetic study. One of the things that we do to combat that is add in our fasting lifestyle or how we compartmentalize our food timing and our meal choices so we can have less of that effect. But the positive takeaway here is that these folks were seeing all of these other beneath the surface changes while improving their metabolic function.
Without making any difference in food choices too. Because we can pull a big lever by altering some of our food choices and our meal timing as well to actually even further optimize the insulin response and get an even better response from ACV supplementation, which is really, really cool because as we take our meal timing and we make it a little bit earlier in the day and we compartmentalize our meals rather than doing 3, 4, 5, 6 different nutrition opportunities or eating or feeding opportunities, if you will, during the day, then we're going to be compartmentalizing those insulin responses. And we have a chance for the average insulin level to actually decrease over time which in this study we didn't necessarily have because most of the patients they weren't following any sort of fasting regimen. They were just eating, whenever they would feel like doing that.
So one of the subsequent studies that we pulled to look at was where they looked at ACV and insulin sensitivity with non-diabetic subjects versus diabetic subjects. So diabetic subjects have insulin resistance, right? They have a dysfunctioned insulin response.
Sure.
So you have to reduce the insulin resistance to ultimately get the body to start healing and moving in the right direction and reversing that course that we talked about. So it's clear that ACV significantly improves insulin sensitivity in insulin resistant subjects. So we're seeing an increase in activity, which is an absolute positive thing, especially in the short term, right? So these are similar physiological effects to things like metformin.
Yeah. Wow.
And we use, and I will always use berberine. Similar mechanism of action without the detrimental long-term side effects of the effects on skeletal muscle, pain, et cetera, et cetera.
Love that. If this patient population had included patients on insulin, then it would have been think of the benefit of ACV and actually becoming more efficient with their insulin response, and then being able to secrete and mobilize more insulin and use it more efficiently. Like that's a metabolic improvement for that patient population. Now, I'm going to speculate they didn't include that patient population because it adds confounding variables to this, so you can't draw as clean of conclusions. But the same mechanism of action may be highly beneficial for them, even more, potentially even more dramatically than this patient population.
Yeah, we need that. This is kind of like when somebody starts fasting and then they've lost a bunch of weight and they go get their labs done and they've seen elevations. They've got more triglycerides. They've got more LDL. They've got, short term, you're going to see, and we did multiple podcast episodes on this, where you're going to see short term elevations, but the long term benefit of getting the weight off.
Yeah.
While you're improving that metabolic function, that insulin sensitivity component, because as insulin sensitivity goes up, resistance goes down. As resistance goes up, sensitivity goes down.
Sure.
It's inverse. We need to find that balance, and we need to turn those mechanisms back on, which goes complete opposite of the management of things like prediabetes and diabetes. So, go ahead, Tommy.
You were alluding to when we actually supplement with ACV earlier.
Yeah, I want to talk about that now, how we differ in that, how we can apply this in the way we think about it, for sure.
Yeah. And so I mentioned not enjoying doing apple cider vinegar beforehand. So your preference is to do it like that, right? To kind of to break a fast or to open a nutrition opportunity potentially?
Yeah, I love it on the front end. I prefer to have that little burn in the belly. I also like to use it occasionally as a hunger squasher.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of apple cider vinegar. And I'm typically more rip the Band-Aid off kind of guy.
Okay.
So I like to just take the bottle, gulp, done.
Okay. I could see that. That burn is an appetite suppressant. I'll give you that.
That kills my wanting to go to that. For me, it's a cue for me to break the emotional connection to food or the desire for food, where it just gives me a clear line where I'm like, okay, now I'm not going to go and just want to just say sleep's been rough, stress has been high. And you have those hunger cues that increase after a night of poor sleep. Like a couple nights ago, I had a project need to finish, so I stayed up late. And that next day, man, I was just ravenous, right? Because we know that your hunger goes up, your satiety goes down, your blood sugar management, your metabolic rate, all
leptin and ghrelin, all kinds of imbalanced.
Yeah, so I prefer to use it as a deterrent and also a reminder.
Yeah.
Right. And never mind, I'm still going to get the benefit because this study shows that you could do it before, after, or even during that midday meal, and you're still going to get the benefits that we shared.
That's excellent. So
it's contrary to what you like to do.
Well, yeah, but I think that what you just highlighted is also for a lot of folks listening, they might be dealing with some ravenous hunger, especially post-exercise, and then going in to break that fast after exercising. That could be a great way to kind of just break that kind of ravenous mindset, and separate, like you said, that emotional connection going into that meal. So for me, as a nutrition opportunity, kind of like closing that window, I like it for that, just because it helps me break the kind of mindset of eating at that point. Because once I've had some apple cider vinegar, it resets my taste buds. It resets everything, and kind of.
So I like to use it as like an opener with intention. You like to use it as like I'm closing my window. This is my line in the sand.
It helps me cut ties, with the fridge,
because you used to be a gratuitous grazer, right?
Correct. Yeah, and so I think that's where that comes from. It helps me just kind of go, okay, any sort of grazing is now over. Even if I wasn't grazing, there's no temptation to do that afterwards. Very, very much easy to have that apple cider vinegar and then set my fasting timer and just get the heck out of the kitchen and be done with it. Because it's almost like brushing your teeth, where I wouldn't want to put food on top of that, or like it doesn't make sense to brush your teeth and then continue eating afterwards. So it's that mental separation for me. I like that.
Yeah, there's so many other things too that vinegar has been shown. Now, these aren't all human studies, but it actually has been shown to increase mitochondrial biogenesis and heat production. So the browning of fat increases our metabolism.
Wow.
It actually works on the hypothalamus in the brain and uses the hormone leptin to raise your metabolism as well. Now, leptin's one of those tricky things where you can have leptin resistance if you don't ever feel full. It can mess with your hunger cues, etc. It can promote carb metabolism in the skeletal muscle, so it can help get that blood sugar out of the bloodstream and into the skeletal muscle more efficiently with that insulin sensitivity that we just talked about.
Fuel your workouts right there too.
Yep. It's been shown in other studies to reduce triglycerides by 30%. It also helps clear out the glycogen reserves in the liver, which is great because we know that fat metabolism, fat storage is controlled by once those short-term energy stores are filled in the liver, then it's going to be your excess energy that hasn't been used efficiently is going to be stored as fat.
Yes. And you have to do that before you can start the fat burning process as well. You have to clear out those liver stores.
Yeah. There was another cool study about it as a performance enhancer. It noticeably increased endurance performance in a treadmill study. It can prevent kidney stones by promoting the activity of the genes involved in calcium and citrate excretion. Wow. So it's got healthy effects on the kidneys. In this study, it was also shown to lower blood pressure. It can improve your gut microbiome and your gut health by maintaining bacterial homeostasis. It can limit inflammation by inhibiting the cox-and-LOX pathway, just like an aspirin does, but without so it almost has like an anti-inflammatory effect, but without the side effects of aspirin. It's been shown in some studies to reverse anxiety-like behavior. So it just keeps going and going, all of these additional benefits. And I just thought of it as that dusty bottle that I didn't like because it tasted like crap.
Yeah, me too.
Let's just be real.
I know. And I mean, even as a seasoned faster, I'll call myself at this point. And I mean, I have a coffee cabinet that has all my fasting lifestyle tools in it.
Optimizers.
Right. And I have some apple cider vinegar in there, but if I had to put a number on the number of days that I actually use apple cider vinegar, like consistently, it's less than 20% of the days. It's probably closer to 10% of the days. But after reviewing this study, I plan to use it consistently after this. I mean, that's why wouldn't I?
It seems so dumb not to.
I know.
Like, it's such a simple lever to pull.
Right.
Hitting the waist and hip areas, right? Helping with hunger, helping with all the other things we said. Never mind the direct changes that we saw in terms of fasting blood sugar in this diabetic study. So just an incredible Pulled it up. I was like, I don't really want to talk about ACV. I mean, we talk about it. We talk about our challenges. And one of our coaches, Karen, she's amazing. She has an ACV cocktail that she makes with a little lemon juice and some cayenne pepper. And so there's a ton of different ways. Salad dressings is another way that it can be used, right? You can make homemade salad dressings with it. So there's different ways to get it in, but it just seems like one of these no-brainers to me. To adopt into your fasting lifestyle, just as another tool for long-term success and sustainability. So
absolutely,
just really, really cool. So as we wrap up today, if you guys are looking for more support in your fasting journey, join one of our upcoming challenges. Head to the show notes. We've got a new fasting persona quiz. We got our blueprint to fasting for fat loss. We've got a sleep guide, an insulin resistant assessment, so something that you can track at home. So ultimately, as we want to continue to build on our fasting lifestyle, we want to give you guys the tools, the support, the encouragement to know that you do have a choice. It is in your control. And even if you are in that diabetic blood sugar category already, that you can reverse course and it doesn't need to be managed. It can ultimately be reversed, Tommy. So just
start here. Start with a big lever.
Start with a really small action that results in big change.
Yes. Absolutely. Because that will be highly motivating to take the next small action that leads to the next small action. And then those results start compounding. It's an amazing process, and it can start literally today with a very small action that takes just a minute.
Yeah. Just dust off the bottle, right? That's all you got to do.
I'm going to go dust off the bottle right now.
All right. I love it. Holding ourselves accountable too. All right, Tommy. Appreciate the conversation, man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.